Hello and welcome to episode 36 of In PS We Trust, a PlayStation podcast. My name's Davey and joined with me as always is Phil.
Happy Valentine's, gamers. And Davey, happy birthday to you, mate. Because this episode is going out on the 16th of Feb, which is your birthday. How does it finally feel to be served without ID? You don't have to draw on that chin strap anymore.
Do you know what, Phil? Actually, I wish that I could get ID'd again. The days of being ID'd again would be a glorious time for me because, gamers, I'm turning 33. I'm getting in my 30s now. I'm actually starting to feel like I'm in my 30s. I'm getting lines here. The light isn't really showing it very well, but I'm getting a line here. And you know, like when you age on a video game, you age your character up, it's always the lines here. That's happening to me now. So it's a stone's throw away now before I hit your age, Phil, and then my bladder doesn't work. So I've got that to look forward to. Spencer, welcome to the podcast as well, my mate. Thank you very much for being here, as you always are.
Thank you very much, mate. Same as Phil says. Happy birthday to you. Not quite as kind, though. I'm just thinking, do better. Try harder.
Well, on that lovely note, guys, I want to know what you're drinking today. So, tradition states we start with Spencer. What are you on today?
Today, I've done something different. Usually, I'll either, in the past, I'd get a crate of buds. And then even last time, I treated myself. And my treat was a crate of buds. Rather than an expensive whiskey, I wanted to go back to my roots. Then I had my whiskey phase. And then my ciders, which were 4 for 6. Or 4 for the price of 3, which we soon found out. This time, I was in B&M Bargains. They don't do any of those deals, but it's generally a cheap store or a shop. And I saw they had pint cans, a 4-pack of pint cans of Strongbow for £5.50. And I thought, 4 pints for £5.50, I'll take 2. So I bought 8 pints for about 11 quid. Bargain! And, just gotta say, it's delightful. It is absolutely delightful. I do miss my record leg on my old mount, but Strongbow will do.
Did they have any other options for Strongbow? Was it just the default Strongbow, or could you have gone for the hazy one? Or, dare I say it, dark fruits?
They didn't have the hazy, they did have the dark fruits. It was more expensive, and it's also worse, so why would I get it?
Whoa! You're saying dark fruits is worse than default Strongbow?
It's way worse. Default Strongbow, when you go on a night out, right? Or like a night, you start day drinking, you go to the pub, and you're like, oh, I just have a fucking Strongbow, fuck it. And they give you Strongbow on tap, you get a nice pint, it's nice and cold. That shit bangs, bro. That hits so hard. It's not quite a Carlin, because I'm a lager man myself. But when you do fancy a cider, Strongbow hits, man. It hits good.
I love that you preference that by saying it's not quite a Carling, which is probably one of the worst lager choices you can ever make. And it seems to be a choice that lately I'm falling into, and I've steered myself away from on this episode because, boys, it makes sense to come to me next. I'm on the beer Moretti's. I'm on the Moretti's today, boys. I was in Tesco, as I quite often am, on shopping for this podcast, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get something a bit unusual. I'm going to get something out there. So I was looking around, comparing all the different beer choices, thinking an old Reverend I saw, and I thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting. Didn't go for it. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go for a safe bet, and I'm not going to go for a Grolsch or an Estrella like I normally would do. I'm going to get a beer Moretti. And then I picked up the pack. It's only a 12-pack. £14 for a fucking 12-pack. Now, boys, I know this recession's hitting hard. I know inflation is going out the wazoo. But why do you tax my alcohol? Why do you take it to the point where my alcohol is getting more expensive? £14 for a 12-pack of beer? This is outrageous! We need to stand. We need to fight for our alcohol prices. Alcohol should be for the masses. Now who's with me?
Yeah!
And that's my impassioned speech, boys. I'm not paying £14 for a 12-pack, but I had to on this occasion because I couldn't go without. Rant over. Phil, what about you, mate? What are you drinking today?
Well, Davey, you've left the best to last. And you know me, I've been on a bit of a journey with my drinking habits lately. Last episode, I introduced you to the Tolukazi. Well, this episode, I've gone for something that you might have not heard of before. The Fosters from Melbourne. Here it is, guys, up to the camera. It's a new lager, never seen it before. And it's crafted to refresh, apparently. And I'm loving it so far. I highly recommend it.
What does the can feel like on this Fosters of Melbourne?
Wet and cold, mate.
Just like you like your women.
What am I going to say to that? Come on.
I knew you were going to say it. I thought, does it even make sense?
You might like the dead. You might like the dead. I don't know what he's into.
What? That's been out in the rain?
Just hose them down after you're done.
Chuck it in the bath.
Yeah, chuck it in the bath. Not for too long, though. You don't want it to swell. Don't want it to swell. So following that revelation, I think, guys, it's time to bring it on to what we've been playing.
This time on NPS We Trust, what have the boys been playing?
It's been 2 weeks since the last podcast episode. So, guys, I want to find out what you've been up to. Phil, in a weird turn of events for the podcast, I'm going to come over to you because I know that you've been slowly ticking away at Guardians. How are you getting on with my number 2 game of 2021?
Well, Davey, you're correct. I've been dipping into Guardians over the last 2 weeks. Outside that, I've been playing a little bit of League and Teamfight Tactics, which I've actually been addicted to over the last month on my iPad. But this is a PlayStation show, so let's talk about Guardians. I'm up to chapter 13 at 16. I'm sat on the Milano, waiting to take on the Church of Truth. And with Horizon coming out on the 18th, I really thought it's time to complete this game. And that's why I've steered clear of Sifu. Last episode, I gave Guardians of the Galaxy an 8 out of 10. And in my opinion, now thinking about it, I'd like to lock that in, guys. It's a Philip Hoy official. Guardians of the Galaxy for the PS5, I'm going 8 out of 10. I don't think it's reached that higher echelon, because ultimately, in the time I've played since the last episode, nothing's really changed. The story's progressed, yeah, and it is interesting, and some great characters have shown up. One that's in particularly very important in the MCU, should probably be in the next Guardians movie, but no spoilers from me. But it hasn't changed enough to bump it up to a 9 or a 10. But guys, I know we haven't used the jingle for a little while. So Spencer, here it goes. I found a bug.
When walls are spinning all around you, you can't properly aim your gun. You find you're falling through the world. I'll hunt you down 'cause you're a bug. I find the bugs, the big bad bugs. The Bug Hunter.
Yeah, so I found a bug, guys. And it's all to do with layering the Guardians' abilities on top of each other. And this is sort of later on into the game where you start fighting the Nova Force, probably for the 3rd, 4th, or 5th time. And I'm talking about the flying guys. There was a part where I grabbed them with Groot. I knocked them to the wall with Drax. Gamora came down with the sword. Me and Rocket both brought out the guns at the same time. And it knocked the Nova character underneath the platform. And I was stuck in a whole loop for ages of just the Guardians going over and over and over, saying how bad and how difficult the fight was, but there was no one on the screen to fight.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, I had loads of visual glitches on my run, like loads of pop-in, loads of different things that would kind of throw me off and take me out of it for just a moment or two, but nothing that would be enough for me to bring it up as an actual bug. Maybe this new year, with me starting off with yourself, Phil, on the last episode, maybe the bug hunter powers have transferred over to you. Maybe now you are now cursed. The lore just keeps on getting deeper.
I think that's what it is. And probably on the next episode, I'm going to go to Bud's. Or maybe I'll get the Jack Daniels out. You've just swapped our personalities here.
Spence, have you got some sudden urge to play Death Stranding all the time? Or am I going to turn around next episode and you're just going to have Death Stranding kit across your entire room? Maybe a bedspread?
I mean, I'd like to. My budget doesn't really allow for it. We haven't swapped that much. But, good game. Maybe I'll play more Death Stranding. I haven't played it in fucking, 3 weeks. We'll see. We'll see. If I can't hunt bugs, I may as well deliver mail.
So speaking of, what have you been up to over the last 2 weeks?
I've mostly only been playing one game. And before we go into it, I'm going to first want to emphasize how good the game sharing is on PlayStation before I say exactly what game it is. Because I was typically a PC gamer before PlayStation, and the way family sharing works on that is that you can play a friend's games if he's offline or even online but not in-game. And then as soon as he's in-game, you have maybe 2 or 5 minutes, and then it boots you off. You can't play it anymore because it's his game. He owns it. Or they own it even. I shouldn't say he. They own it. Yet PlayStation, damn, the game sharing on PlayStation, Davey, we're playing the same game right now, correct?
Yes, we are.
It's in your library. I haven't bought this game. Yet, we're both playing it at the same time, screen sharing it to each other in picture, and both earning trophies.
It's wild.
Damn.
It is wild that we're able to do this, because this is something that only you cottoned on to, actually only probably a month ago now, when you were trying to get me for like the 100th time to go back to It Takes Two. So I'm telling you, it's a 10 out of 10. I'm telling you, it's the best game of the generation so far. And I was like, oh God, okay, I'll try it out. And then you said, oh, well, why don't we kind of swap accounts and do this family sharing thing and kind of figure this all out? And so we did. And so on the base of that, then, I've now got access to Kenna, Bridge of Spirits, which I never had before, which obviously you bought. And you have managed to cop Sifu, which is the game that we've been playing up to this point. We're in Death Month, boys. The first game of Death Month is out, Sifu. And we've been playing the absolute living shit out of it.
Feels very much like the PS3 days where you could just share content across the consoles. So that's quite a nice thing to pick up on. My problem is, it's a 3-man podcast, isn't it? I need to find that person to do family sharing, unless your family can involve more than one person.
It's not family sharing. It's a different kind of system as Steam, because Steam allows you to family share up to 5 consoles, or up to 5 PCs, or Steam accounts, I should say. Whereas for this, basically what we've done is I've signed in with Davey's account to my PlayStation, and I've made it his primary PS5. So what that does is that allows me to log in on my account, and because it thinks it's his PS5, it lets me play his games. And he's done the same for my account. So technically my account is linked to his PS5 more so than it is mine. So he can play my games, I can play his. And we can just do that. Davey's got every PS Plus game since the dawn of time. I've got them now. It's huge.
It also means that I've got access to... it's a bit of a tough deal for me, to be honest, Spence, when I think about this. You've done pretty well from this deal.
You got It Takes Two, bro.
What more?
Best game of last year.
What more is there? What more is there, to be fair? That's very true.
Any highlights in the PS Plus library there?
No. To be fair, the main benefits, I think, are that Davey gets It Takes Two and Kenna. Or it's not even that, because we could have played It Takes Two anyway, but now you can earn trophies from it. My main benefit is that I'm able to play your copy of Sifu, and the other thing that I've picked up on from your library is I can play Spider-Man Remastered.
Yeah.
So I think prior to Spider-Man 2 coming out, I'll play your copy of Spider-Man Remastered, get the platinum, and play Miles and then Spider-Man 2 when that comes out. And that's what I'll do before that launch.
It also means, actually, you stumbled into something that you're going to be very grateful for, because I've bought the collector's edition of Horizon Forbidden West, which comes with a steelbook, but with a digital code in it, which means that you'll be able to play Horizon Forbidden West from my account for free. Although, I would say to you that you shouldn't play it without playing the first one.
I'll play the first one first, 100%, but I'm not going to pay for the second game if I don't have to.
Fair. Cheapskate. Anyway.
So if I like it, I'll buy it.
Thank you. We don't endorse piracy on this podcast, but we do endorse ways to be able to help you, the consumer. And at the end of the day, we ain't paid by Sony, so fuck Sony. If you can get around paying for it and you got a good mate that you can share your login details with, do it. Save yourself some money. Fuck them. Why not? They don't owe you a goddamn thing.
I've endorsed piracy on this podcast loads of times.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Yes, you're the person that probably should have
loads of times.
Probably said that statement.
No wonder this was my idea.
And for the record, Sony, Tencent, nothing to do with me, guys. You can just DM me if you need me to say something on the podcast. I'll put it out there.
So, the whole point of this topic is what we've been playing, and as you quite rightly said, Spence, we have been grinding through Sifu. Now, before I get into my thoughts, which are very in-depth, I want to go to you, Spence, because you haven't put as much time into this game as I have. How are you finding it?
I think I've put maybe 8 to 9, maybe 10 hours into Sifu so far. And the game, as people are saying, is hard. The game is hard. The first boss, before I go into that, the game works so that when you die, you age 1 year. And if you don't kill, I think it's a certain enemy, or like a specific enemy before then, if you die again, you'll age 2 years. And that number keeps going up unless you lower it. So the next time you die, you'll age 3 years, then 4 years, then 5, until you're like 78. And the next time you die, you're just dead. You have to start again. And every decade you age, you get stronger, but you also have less health. So it's kind of a really cool system on how like the aging works in that game, and how it kind of rewards you in terms of strength, because you're older, you're smarter, you're just a stronger human, you've been training for longer. But because you're older, you're closer to death as is, Phil knows, you have less HP. So it's a really cool system on just kind of how they've implemented it. But that game, Sifu, the combat, oh my god. We've talked about this game a lot, like outside of the podcast, and we've both played in very different ways. Whereas I'm more akin to just dodging attacks, because if you hold L1, which is the block button, and you move the stick, you're able to dodge moves, and there are sweeps, which you have to dodge high, and basically any other attack you dodge low, it's only sweeps you have to avoid with high. And that's what I do, which also means that sweeps fuck me, because I'm always dodging low. Some of the bosses in that game, fuck me, they sweep. And I have lost countless lives. I entered the last area like age 60. But then obviously you go through the game again. You're stronger. You know more about the game. You know how it functions. You know the area. You know the enemies. You know the layout. And you just bring it down. And with all that knowledge and my Zen capacity and my skill, in 7 hours of game time, I beat Sifu. And fucking hell, what a fantastic game. I've beaten the game. I have gotten to... I beat the first level without losing a year of age. The second level, I lost 1 year of age, and I'm trying to bring that back down. For the platinum, you have to beat this game under age 25. I am struggling with that. But I've just started learning how to parry. So I'm sure I'll get there soon. Davey, mate, do you want to give some of your thoughts on this game and how you've kind of gone through the game yourself?
Sifu was one of my most anticipated games for this year. And going into this experience, I had very, very high hopes and very high expectations. Can I just say that it's blown those expectations and those hopes completely out of the water. If this released in the same year as Returnal, I would be struggling to pick which one I prefer. I adore this game. This game is one of my favorite games, tied probably for first, maybe second, maybe just behind Returnal because of the story in terms of my favorite games of the generation. I absolutely adore it.
Bro, what do you mean in terms of the story? You could explain the Sifu story. You can't explain Returnal story.
No, but I can explain the feelings I had on that midpoint credit.
Fine. Fine.
You know I'm right. You know I'm right. We can't go
I know
into
you're
spoilers,
right. I
but
know
you
you're
I'm
right. Yeah.
So Sifu is a kung fu game built from the ground up to be kung fu. And what kung fu is all about learning the art throughout your entire life, that you're never truly a master, that you're always improving. And that is the way that this game is. It's a game that is a roguelite at heart, but really you don't improve with your abilities, you improve with your own skill. You improve through your own sweat, your own determination, your own ability to be able to get better at the combat system. And that is so true the more I've been playing it. I have now platinumed Sifu. I've done everything. I've beaten the game at less than 25. I've done everything. Now, my first time through that game, I beat it on the final boss at 78. I beat it on my last chance saloon. And then I did 2 extra runs through to be able to get my number down. And I ended up beating it at 25 on the mark. It's a game that I didn't unlock any extra skills from when I beat it at 78. All I did was I got better. As Spencer said, it's very much a case of it's a beat 'em up for the modern generation. It's a case of you go into an area, the camera's behind you, generally for the most part, but it does move sideways in certain places for artistic reasons, for old boy references and the like. And you just literally wail on people, and you have to master a few basic commands. You have to master your blocks, you have to manage your evades, and you have to manage your parries. 3 different things that you have to manage, and your combos. Now, your combos are very basic. They can just be a square, triangle, or they could be just pressing triangle 4 times. It could be as easy as that, but it can get as complex as you want it to be and as stylish as you want it to be. The game gives you all the tools there to make the game your own and to make it as stylish as you want it to be, but it doesn't shy away from the fact that it demands you to learn. It demands you to get beaten, to adapt, to get better. And in that way, it reminds you very much of like a Dark Souls experience in being able to go in and say, right, you're facing this challenge, you have to get better. There's no hand-holding here, no one you can call in, no support, it's not going to scale to you. Get good. And that really resonated with me. The beautiful thing about this game is that with the aging system, is that unlike Dark Souls, when you die in Dark Souls, you walk back to a bonfire and you fight your way back through that level, get back to that boss, and then fight that challenge again, lose, and just repeat. And it's annoying. Whereas in this, you die, you wake up immediately where you left off with the boss at exactly the same health that he was left at. And so it means then that you're immediately back into the action, but it made me feel like I was at a fighting game tournament. In terms of, I'd die, I'd take a second. Focus. Breathe out. Just take a second just to think about your loss. What did I do wrong? What did I do right? What could I do better? Get up, get back into it, and kick some fucking ass. And there just isn't a feeling like this in games very often. A game where the combat system is absolutely superb. The sound design is incredible. Some of the best sound design I've heard in a video game ever in my entire life. It's so impactful. It's so rewarding. The haptic feedback that comes with your parries and that comes with your combos and your blocks and your evades, the sounds that are coming out of your controller as well as your headset, they're all just there to get you into that experience, and it just keeps you there from the moment that you start it until you've finished. And whereas in other games, I get the platinum is uninstalled, this game is still installed on my hard drive. I'm going back for a 20-year-old run. I'm going to do it. And that's a challenge I've set for myself because I cannot wait to experience this game again and to play through it again. It's a phenomenal game from the start to the end. And Slow Clap, the studio that developed this, have made an absolute winner here. This game is a must play.
So guys, you've both played the game Sifu. I've got it installed on my PlayStation. I've played the first 10 minutes. So I've got no basis here to give any sort of rating. And it'd be interesting to see after that glowing review that you've given Davey. Spencer, I'm sensing you don't love it as much as Davey, but we'll see. Davey, do you want to give me your rating out of 10 first, and then we'll come to Spencer for his rating and a little bit of an explanation why he's rated it slightly lower than you.
So if I was thinking about it, if I was just going off the cuff, I'd say it's a 10 out of 10. When I have a second to ponder on it, it's a 9 out of 10. And the reason for that, the reason why it's not a perfect score, is because the story just isn't there to be able to support it. The story is very much secondary. There's enemies that you fight across the game, and you do learn their backstory through the board, through a series of collectibles that you uncover as you venture through the game. But the story isn't there to be able to really elevate it to that 10 out of 10 experience. I'd go in with a 9. A 9 out of 10, which is still extremely high.
Spencer, what are you saying? Are you hitting a 9 or a 10 with this game?
I honestly thought I would give a rating just marginally lower than Davey, but I actually think it's a 9 out of 10 as well. This game is phenomenal, but it's exactly like you said, the story doesn't hit like anywhere near as well as it could do. The story's good, the story's fine, and you make sense of the game, but there's not as much emotion as there should be, or there's no really real feeling in the story. So yeah, that does bring it down from being a 10 out of 10 experience. If the story was better, it could potentially be a 10 out of 10, but I agree with you. I will say, because I like roguelikes, I think this game, Sifu, is better than Hades, which I also rated highly. I think Sifu is a better game.
Wow. That's crazy, because I still haven't got round to Hades yet, but you were really, really impassioned with Hades when you were playing it.
I was, but I think the more time I've spent away from Hades, the more I've kind of soured on it. Because Hades, as great as it is, I love the story. I love the kind of lore built into the game. I love the whole Greek mythology. I'm a big fan of Greek mythology as is. So that game being based around it is just cherry on the cake. But the combat in that game is just nowhere near as in-depth or just as satisfying as Sifu's. The whole point of the game is the combat. That's what a roguelike is, basically. It's how the gameplay functions. But every weapon you use in Hades only has 2 animations. Whereas in Sifu, you have loads. There's countless animations in this game, and there's countless different combo routes and enemies to face where you have to approach them differently. Whereas Hades is kind of the same thing, rinse, repeat. There are different enemies, you approach them differently, sure. But it's more or less just to kind of run away, shoot them from afar, or just stay out of range, and that is it. So because of gameplay and combat alone, I think Sifu is a better game.
I think that's enough of what we've been playing, boys. I think it's time we move it into quick news. Quick news.
Oh, boy, that was good. All right, quick news. We now have the PlayStation results for the quarter ending December 31st, 2021. The PS5 has shipped 3.9 million units. The PS5 lifetime is at 17.3 million, and the PS4 lifetime is at 116.8 million. There are currently 48 million PS Plus subscribers and 111 monthly active PlayStation users.
Zing-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling! Ding-a-ding-ding-ding-ding-ding-ding! Quick news. Discord is gradually rolling out the ability to link your PlayStation Network account to share what games you are playing. So if you haven't already, make sure you head over to Discord and link up that PlayStation account. This is the first step to full Discord integration on PlayStation, which is something the community has been wanting ever since the launch of that failed party system.
That's right, guys. We're doing zombie noises from the game that cannot be mentioned on this episode of In PS We Trust. So expect 2 more of those coming your way. Now, my quick news for the day, Grand Theft Auto 5 is coming to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S on March 15th. For the one person in the world that has not played this game, you now have access to graphics modes, which is up to 4K and up to 60 frames per second, improved textures and draw distances, HDR and ray tracing options, faster loading, 3D audio, and DualSense support, like haptic feedback. So, for those of you that are really up GTA's arse, you can get back into this with next-gen features, and for the one person out there that hasn't played this game before, now's the best time to jump in. And following this, we also had the news that GTA 6 is in active development right now. So it set the internet on fire, people speculating where it wants to be. We'll have to wait and see before we get any more news on this.
I don't have zombie noises ready like Davey, so I'll do one of my own. Quick news. How was that? You like that, boys? There is a new beta UI for PS5 and PS4, which supposedly rolled out on the 9th of the 2nd. Some of the features included are open and closed parties, meaning you can now hide parties from friends, so that just those that are invited to the party can see and join. The game base is now split into 3 different tabs, being friends, parties, and messages, and you can now also filter the games in your library by genre, and also choose to keep games on your home screen even if they're not installed, with the addition of a simple keep in home button. And they've also increased the number of total games and apps that appear on your home screen to 14.
Ting-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling! Ring-ring-ring-ring-ring! Quick news! We have an update on the highly anticipated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. Master Splinter has been added to the roster. This brings it up to 6 playable characters, with Donatello, which is Spencer's favourite, Michelangelo, Raph, and Leonardo. And of course, April O'Neil. We don't have a confirmed date yet. All we know is going to be launching this year, and I'm hyped for pizza time.
Ubisoft gave employees NFTs. Now, NFTs are the scourge that just keeps coming back. In the aftermath of countless companies attempting to launch NFTs and then being beaten down into submission into taking them back, Ubisoft exec Nicolas Poulard claims, "We just don't get it." As reported by Kotaku, Ubisoft recently held an internal workshop to address employee concerns regarding the company's venture into NFTs. At the same time, as a celebration for the 20th anniversary of the Ghost Recon franchise, the company also started giving out NFTs to employees. How out of touch can you truly be?
I lived my life thinking fairy tales, they're for pussies. Add some gore, add some blood, add some depth. And that's what they've done. Big B's back, baby. Telltale revealed a first look at The Wolf Among Us 2. This highly anticipated sequel, along with The Expanse, marks the return of Telltale, and apparently, Telltale have thought over their methods behind the scenes on how to work as a studio, supposedly plotting out whole seasons of games from the get-go, and now utilising a new engine, the Unreal Engine.
Quick news! Quick news. My game to watch from the E3 episode. And don't go back to it. It wasn't our best. Atomic Heart has dropped a new trailer, which you'll need to check out. We have a confirmed date for 2022, **BER. So from my calculations, that's either September, October, November, or December. So the latter half of the year. Dooms McGordon is heading up the audio on this game, so strap yourself in for some heavy licks. Trailer links will be in the podcast description.
Quick news. An update on Microsoft's acquisition of Activision. Call of Duty and other popular Activision games will continue to be released on PlayStation and Nintendo platforms beyond current agreements. Some massive news for us guys, especially as we were really worried, I suppose is the overall feel that we had on the last episode in terms of if they could siphon this content off and lock this away from the masses that play Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and all the different Blizzard games and Activision games that are out there in the wider ecosystem. Now, following this news, guys, I do want to know what your kind of thoughts are with this. Spence, we'll start with you. How do you feel about this?
I mean, it's great. It's great that we're going to have Call of Duty on PlayStation still. That's awesome because, you and I love Call of Duty. That's great. And now they've got an even bigger budget to make us better games. I kind of feel as though maybe they'll care less because, as we know, Call of Duty, the last two titles or the last two iterations, have had fantastic haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. So maybe they won't be so focused on utilizing those PlayStation features anymore, which sucks because they've done a really good job of it so far, but I might be wrong. In terms of their game still being on Nintendo, there hasn't been a Call of Duty on Nintendo in years, so that's cap. There's not going to be any Activision games on Nintendo other than, Crash?
Well, they're saying they want to bring Call of Duty to the Switch. So they are saying that. I mean, I don't know how the hell it can run it, if I'm honest with you. I'm surprised that the PS4 can run Vanguard, but it can, even though apparently it runs like arse. So I can't wait to see how the Switch handles this. Maybe they'll limit COD to 20 frames per second or something. I'm sure that would go down great.
What they used to do in the old iterations of Call of Duty, they used to release a separate, watered-down version of Call of Duty, and that's what would be on Nintendo systems. There was like a Modern Warfare... what was it called? It was literally called like Modern Warfare Downgrade or something like that. And it was on the DS. And they did this like similar stuff for the Wii. They had like Black Ops, like First Aim or something. It was like stupid game we can't mention names. I almost said it then as well, actually. I don't know why. But it was stupid things like that. And they just released a game. It would add half the modes, half the weapons. It'd look like shit. And that's the Call of Duty they would have. I don't see the point because Call of Duty doesn't really fit the Nintendo audience as is. So just leave it off.
What about yourself, Phil? How are you feeling about all this?
I think it's huge news for Nintendo, but this isn't a Nintendo podcast. We're talking PlayStation. And for PlayStation, I think we're coming at it at a slightly skew-if angle here, guys. Because you want to think about it now. With COD being an Xbox property, do we as PlayStation fans ultimately want them to be flooding our console with their games? I know you love COD, but the more and more that we're getting Xbox games on, they're going to be encouraging people to move over to their platforms on all the different things that we've covered in previous topics about this. By scaling back. Maybe this is just a feeder. This is the way they get them to move to Xbox, by giving them a lesser version, as we said previously, on the PlayStation. Do we want that? Do we want them on PlayStation?
Yes, we
anymore?
do. Yes, we definitely bloody do. We 100% do. I can't see them using it as a feeder. I know you're really like kind of stuck on this, and to be fair, it's probably the best way to be able to run your business, right? To be able to really kind of limit down the availability of different features on one platform compared to another. But for me, I think the best way they can go about this is them saying, well, sure, you can have the full feature-rich game on PlayStation, but you're paying £70 for it there. Whereas over here on Xbox, you got it with Game Pass, baby. And that's your way to be able to encourage it. And therefore, then, you're not limiting the other platforms, so you're not looking like a bad guy, but you're still kind of enticing them in. You're still kind of there with the apple, seductive eyes. Come to me, baby. While still giving them the full meal of a bit of slop there for the PlayStation fans. And I'll quite happily sip that slop up. So following my ASMR, I think it's time for us to move it into Rumour Has It.
Kick it! Wake up with a rumor and you don't want to go. You ask if it's confirmed and they still say no.
So boys, rumour has it. Actually, before we get into it, this rumour is about something specific, so I'm going to explain what the situation is beforehand. This rumour is about a game that typically we can't mention. So for the sake of our own sanity, and for clarity for the audience, for the listeners, that rule is omitted for this Rumour Has It. Resident Evil. Oh, that feels good to say. Oh, baby. Boys, do you want to just unmute and say it just once?
Resident Evil.
This is a special moment for me. You don't know how long and how much anxiety I've had over saying this over the last 30 odd episodes. I even get it in day-to-day life when someone brings it up and I'm speaking about games. As soon as I say the immortal words of Resident Evil, it chills me, guys. Resident Evil, Resident Evil, Resident Evil. I am so glad we can say it.
Feels good, mate. It feels good. So, like I was saying, Rumour has it, we now have a big Resident Evil 4 remake rumour. The Wesker redesign, which was initially leaked quite a while ago, supposedly wasn't from the Resident Evil 4 remake, but from a different Resident Evil project entirely. The village portion of Resident Evil 4, which is during the start of the game, will be set at night rather than in the morning to make the game feel spookier, quote unquote. They want to roll the separate ways and Davey's favourite, Assignment Ada, into one package and expand those into the main game and beef it up so that it has more of an impact. They're planning on announcing this remake in early 2022, supposedly. And the studio, which was initially developing this title, was M2, who are the people who developed the RE3 remake, and have since been replaced with Production Studios 1, who are the main Resident Evil team. M2 have since been shifted to a support studio for the title, however their original work is still going to be put to use. Boys, there is a lot to unpack here, a lot. I'm not going to say anything else. Just, what are your thoughts? Take it away. The floor is open.
Right, Spence. After what you just said there, there's a lot here that we can unpack, as you quite rightly said. Now, the first thing I want to get into that I find a little bit weird with this is that M2, the studio who made Resident Evil 3 Remake, the game that we as a collective podcast really enjoyed, and me as a long-term Resident Evil 3 fan, in fact, putting it in my top 3 games out of the entire series over on my YouTube, I love the direction they took with this in terms of taking it in a kind of bold new way from the original, completely reinventing what that game was, really focusing it up and putting it into something brand new. The team were doing that with this game, and yet were then pulled from it for doing that. Makes no fucking sense to me. And then they put the team that made Resident Evil 2, which is, albeit that's very different from the original Resident Evil 2, they put them on it just because it got a better reception. Doesn't make fucking any sense to me whatsoever. No sense. In terms of the production level between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, in terms of the remakes, very similar. Both look stunning. Both have their own unique things that make them very distinct from each other. Granted, I don't think anybody in their right mind would tell you that Resident Evil 3 Remake is superior to Resident Evil 2 Remake, because it's not. But from what the base games were for those games, they are very different experiences, both of them. But I think if you're trying to reinvent Resident Evil 4, maybe M2's approach is the better one to put on this, because they're the ones who can take the project, not have any emotion, and say, right, we're going to totally rethink this from the ground up and just make it. And that's what they did with Resident Evil 3, and I really enjoyed that. Now, what this says in terms of the village portion of the game will be set at night rather than being in the day, and it'll be an overall more spookier tone, that they're trying to capture some of the demo, which showed that there was ghosts and Leon walking through, and there was armor falling apart and armor coming to life, and oh god, it's all happening around Leon. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. When I revisited Resident Evil 4 about a year ago for my reviews, the game just isn't even remotely scary. There's not even one part of that is even terror-inducing. Even the worst enemy in that, you know, when they're like, the regenerators, just fucking shoot me in the leg and run past. The game is not even remotely challenging, not scary. You got more ammo than you know what to do with. I am all for a reimagining in this game. And I think with a different spin on this, making it closer to what Resident Evil actually is, rather than what Resident Evil 4 is, I think this game could be a real big success. And you've got the only issue I can see this game having is that you've got to balance up the Joes of this podcast, like our number one fan, Joe Thomas, who loves Resident Evil 4, and the rest of the sane world, who realizes that Resident Evil 4 isn't actually that great. You've got to kind of balance that and be able to forge a path unique to itself. And the worry is that neither side is going to be 100% happy. All I know is that I will be very, very welcome to a brand new direction for Resident Evil 4.
Phil, mate, how about yourself? Do you have any thoughts on this so far?
It's a difficult one because I'm hearing rumours all the time about Resident Evil 4. It feels great to say it. Still feels so good. My personal opinion on this, I think Capcom are worried. And worried for a good reason. Because Resident Evil 4 is regarded as one of the best games of all time. Not my personal opinion. I obviously love Resident Evil 2 a lot more than Resident Evil 4. But by the majority, Resident Evil 4 is up there. We only have to look back to the IGN best game of all time and where that game ranked. I believe it was in the top 10. Maybe don't quote me on that, but it was very highly rated. I think we're finding ourselves in a Half-Life 3 situation where the expectation is way too high for what the developer can handle. And it keeps ramping up. The more we talk about it, the expectation gets higher. Resident Evil 4 has always been an outlier for me in terms of story, so I'll welcome a change. I feel like in the main line, it's the most out there. So if they're going to make a change, brilliant. Bring it more in line with Resident Evil. And to make it the ultimate Resident Evil, which is what it needs to be to live up to all those expectations, for me, 7 and 8, first person. The quality of those games. Those games moved on a lot in the last 20 years since the 1996 Resident Evil. And part of those games genuinely felt scary. My God, when that woman burst through the wall when I was walking up those stairs, I still get nightmares of that. Remake, 2, 3, the attention to detail, the way they elevated those games. They need to go down that route. Let's not try something new with Resident Evil 4. Let's pick up on what we've learned with the new iterations of Resident Evil, as I've mentioned. It's not time to start bringing in ghosts into this IP. That is mental. That's where I'm at, Spence. How about yourself?
Bro, I never even contemplated the thought of making it first person. It's a good idea. I don't think they'll do it, but it's actually a great idea. What I want for this game, there's a lot of changes we've seen here, like it being spookier and such. Fantastic. That's literally what I want. I played RE4 maybe half a year ago. It's the third worst Resident Evil game, in my opinion. 4, 5, and 6 aren't good games. RE4, as much as people say it's the best game of all time, it literally could have been any franchise. It is not a Resident Evil game. It could have been called SOCOM or fucking Call of Duty, Medal of Honor. They could have called it anything. Just change the enemies, give them guns, and it's a different game. I want this remake to look nothing like RE4. I literally want it. Same character, sure. Leon, big Leon. Love him. Class geezer. Just change everything else. Literally, nighttime, fantastic. Scary. I hate the dark. Always got to have a nightlight on. I got a little Superman one by there. Keeps me safe. I want RE2. But with an RE4 outfit, I suppose. Which is why I'm quite happy with this rumour, if it's real, that they're saying that development team's changed. I think the RE3 remake development team would be better suited to make an RE4 remake that was closer to the original game. But RE2, their team, that remake's team, are better suited to make it a horror game, which is what I want out of this franchise, what I want out of this remake. I want to play this and shit my pants. And if it's a 1-to-1 copy of RE4, that is not going to happen, even if they make it a bit darker. They need to change the whole vibe of the game, the way the combat, well, not combat, maybe the way the inventory works, the way picking up ammo works. All of it. And that's what I want. I want a different game. I want it to be RE 4.5.
Yeah, you definitely don't want it RE 4.5 because then it goes from Resident Evil 4 to being more like Resident Evil 5, which, as we said before, is a worse game than Resident Evil 4. So I'm sorry, Phil. I know we had a great time on that game, but it's objectively worse. It really is. It's not.
It's the worst Resident Evil game.
You're breaking my heart, bro.
It is. RE6 is at least fun.
RE5 is better than 6. You got Wesker in it, for God's sake. Anyway, we're not getting off to this fucking side note. All I want to say, right, first off, I want to go back to Phil's point there. If they made this first person, I think I actually would be disappointed in this. Because I want it to at least feel like Resident Evil 4 in terms of still having the camera behind Leon. But like you said, Spence, kind of recapture that Resident Evil 2 magic of having it so that your items are limited, that the enemies are then scaled down from there, and each one is a choice to go in and fight. That's all I want. It's not too hard to implement. Literally just a case of, give me a choice. Do I engage and then have no ammo? Or do I stock up, which I always do until the final boss, and then I got far too much that I can ever use? That's all I want. I want that choice. The thing for me about this spookier design is I think about the boss, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of this, but I think it's the Verdugo, which is the boss where, as you're walking through the game, it's cutscenes galore. He's a black monster with a tail, and what happens is you have to hit like you have to freeze him, and then you can kill him in one hit if you got a rocket launcher. But it's a really tense moment in the game, but it's full of quick time events as you actually fight him while you're waiting for a lift to come down. They could make that so fucking awesome if it was the case you have to fucking sneak, or you have to be stealthy, or you have to just do something to stay away from this thing that is hunting you for like 5 minutes. And it would really like kind of recapture the same element that made Mr. X so effective. But you've got 5 minutes of it. And that would just be so good in such a short period of time, rather than what they did there, which is chuck a load of cutscenes at you and a load of quick time events, hit something over, shoot to a rocket launcher. Because there was a rocket launcher just before the boss fight, so why wouldn't you use it? They could do so much with that fight. And that's what gets me really excited if it's going for a horror moment. And that's my kind of overriding thought right now. I just wish I was part of this design team. Good God.
Even though I've played RE4, I played it on PC, I didn't even dare go near the kind of expanded story modes that are in that game, the Separate Ways. So I don't actually know a lot about Separate Ways or Assignment Ada. So if you boys would like to fill me and the audience in on this.
Sure. So the Separate Ways expansion, it was for the PS2 when obviously Shinji Mikami said it was never going to come to the PS2, and then it came a few months later. And of course, he never cut his own head off, so he's a liar overall. But this expansion really was what Ada's been up to in the events of the game. Because in the events of the main game, she turns up at random points and either at one point is wearing shades and then does a couple of backflips and then has a little bit of flirty encounter with Leon. And the next time you see her, she really just chucks down a rocket launcher and cheers, Ada, thanks for being there. She was up to her own adventure, trying to find Las Plagas samples for Wesker during that game. And during her Separate Ways expansion, you follow Ada, you play as Ada, and you get to really have some decent conversations with Wesker, but they're kind of done by a codec as you play it. And the thing that gets me thinking about this, guys, is would you want to see Wesker take a more active role? Because obviously with Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, we haven't seen Wesker come up yet, because he's not part of those stories. He's obviously part of Resident Evil, the original, and then building on from 4, he's in 5, and of course, he's in the one they really should remake, which is Code Veronica, which obviously they're not doing for some ungodly reason. would you want to see Wesker take a more active role in this game?
I'm glad you asked that question, Davey. Because for me, I think Wesker is grossly underused throughout Resident Evil. I absolutely love the character. He's the character that gets me excited about Resident Evil. Whenever someone says Umbrella, I always think of Wesker. I always think he's the big bad, somewhere behind the scenes pulling all the strings. He's involved somewhere with it all. And he's got such an air of kind of mystery towards him, probably because he hasn't featured in every game, right? And there's always things in games where you think, maybe Wesker was involved in that. We don't know. So yeah, any more story on that? I'm well into it. And I want to know where all these superpowers come from. I'm a big Matrix fan, right? In Resident Evil 5, he's dodging bullets like fucking Neo, right? Let's get more into that.
Well, of course, Phil, you'd know that he takes, after he gets stabbed by Tyrant, he injects himself with a virus and gets out of there. And then in Code Veronica, he starts doing all these random Matrix moves and fights Chris.
He literally runs up the wall and burns fire into the wall. He goes so fast.
He does.
It's like, let's explore that.
He does.
Come on. That's what excites me.
You want like a kind of Sifu level, like where it's just Wesker and he's just like, my powers. And he's just like punching people into oblivion and running up walls. I mean, I'm all down for that. I mean, any Wesker content, like you said, Phil, I'm down for. That guy can literally do whatever he wants to me, and I will quite happily sit there. I'd be like, can I just put on your sunglasses while you absolutely bum the living fuck out of me? And he'd be like, yes, please. And I'd be like, yeah, baby, I'm in. Because I'll do whatever he wants. I'll be a bitch for Wesker. I love Wesker. So if we get more chance of seeing him, God damn, I'm in. I am involved. I cannot wait.
See, I think, boys, this is where we differ. I don't have the affinity for Wesker that you boys have. And I'm not sure why, because obviously I've experienced the same games, bar Code Veronica. I haven't played that. Maybe that's why. But I don't have that love for Wesker you have. I think the best we're going to get with Wesker is going to be in Welcome to Raccoon City 2, the movie. I think if we're going to find out anything else about that character, mate, that's where it's going to be. I would like to see him more involved than just being a codec in this remake. But I don't have the same love for him you lot do. Like, after playing these games, all I ever think is, why does he lose? He's like Superman in DC with me. It's like, why does Superman ever lose?
Spence, what was the name of that movie?
Welcome to Raccoon City.
Resident Evil.
I'm calling a fucking shot for you bringing that piece of shit movie up in this podcast. I never want to hear that fucking movie ever referenced again on this podcast. I'm punishing you to a shot, as long as Phil agrees with me on this, because that film is fucking trash.
100%. Because I was in Asda earlier, picking up The Fosters, and it's been released on DVD, and I saw it on the shelf and went, as I walked past, and I shook my head at a DVD. That's what it's made me do, guys.
DVD, did you guys not pre-order the 4K Blu-ray?
2 shots.
You boys know, when we came out of that movie, I enjoyed it.
Don't dig your grave any deeper than it already is, Spence.
I'm standing my ground. I don't think it was a good Resident Evil movie, but I enjoyed it for what it was.
Get your shot and let's end this.
I'm going to do it tomorrow when we're out.
Okay, I'll upload video evidence of this. Stop! Topic time! Okay, we are here at topic 1, and today's topic is really just a follow-up from the kind of breaking news that we had last episode, in episode 35, and with that, we only had myself and Phil there. And sure, it was a dynamic duo, and I think we did a pretty good job at covering it in the heat of the moment, but we were missing some context from, of course, yourself, Spence. And what I thought we'd do is we'd get on another person who is actually more of a Destiny hardcore player than the rest of us. So joining the podcast, making his podcast debut, is James, a.k.a. at Big Man Ornstein.
pick up my trophy.
So obviously you got mine and Phil's initial reactions last episode. Spence, before we hand it off to James to get some much needed context into this and how it is from the Destiny player's perspective, I do want to know what your thoughts were when, of course, Bungie were announced to be joining the PlayStation family for a whopping $3.6 billion.
Yeah, bro. I mean, 3.6 bill is the biggest acquisition Sony has made to date. That is insane. And Bungie, it kind of feels like Sony's just spitting at Microsoft's face with this. That's an insane acquisition. Out of all the ideas for revenge, we discussed it. We thought, what could they do to get back at Microsoft? No one thought of this. This is mental. It's a huge acquisition with it's a big company. It's a big developer. Obviously, Halo, Destiny, huge games. Destiny's still going. I played a bit of Destiny, not a lot. It's fun. Bit weird. Didn't like it that much. Halo, Jesus. Loved Halo back in the day. I liked Halo 5 when that came out. I didn't play it too much, but I did enjoy my time with it. My only concern with this acquisition is I don't know how well Bungie's games, or their typical games, the games they've made in the past, translate to PlayStation. I think it's kind of a different audience, because I wouldn't really want to see like a Halo-esque game on PlayStation. I prefer the Call of Duty or Killzone or Resistance style games.
What do you mean by that? Because Halo's just like any other first-person shooter, really.
It is, but it's like, it's got a floaty feel to it, which I don't know. I just don't want on PlayStation. It's a weird thing I have. But like when you say you jump in COD, it's fast, it's action paced. Whereas in Halo, you kind of just hover in the air for a bit, and it's good, it's nice, but it's kind of like got a slower pace to it, and I don't want that. So I don't know what Bungie's going to do, whether they stick to their traditions, because Destiny has the same kind of jump as well, or the same kind of movement in that game. Bit more than Halo, but it's got the similar stuff. I'd like to see them change for PlayStation. Make different types of first-person shooters. That's what I want.
Do you think what they can add in terms of value to the wider ecosystem of PlayStation, in terms of how they can upskill the rest of the teams that are part of it? You know, if, say, for example, one day in a frozen Earth far, far away in the future, that Guerrilla go back and make Killzone, or an eclipse suddenly happens, planets crash into each other, the world's going to shit, gravity's flipped upside down, and then Insomniac decide to make Resistance again. Do you reckon if any of these things happen, that the Bungie influence on those studios, is that something you actually want to happen, or are you at this point saying no, you don't really want them involved with it?
I mean, I'd rather them not be involved. I think it stands to reason for them to be involved now that they're all acquired and such. They're all kind of under the family of Sony, but no, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just have a strange feeling with Bungie. I think whatever they bring to the table for Sony isn't going to be worth 3.6 bill, and that's it, really.
So, Phil, you and me, obviously, we covered this in a little bit of depth last time on the breaking news. And obviously, we were pretty much both jointly excited, really, about this acquisition and saying about how much we think that it could make a difference to PlayStation, how having them on board and it not being locked down to PlayStation exclusively as a platform was the best idea, that was a great choice, especially where at the time we had all the rumors going around that Activision were going to be locking down COD onto Xbox, and we didn't want that to happen for the legions of Destiny players that are out there in the wild, you know, scrounging through on their PCs and, you know, with their high-end rigs and all this nonsense that, you know, pressing Control P to print stuff, doing all the stuff that I have no idea about when it comes to PC gaming, that we didn't want them stranded apart from this ecosystem. So we were really grateful for it. Has your opinion, or with this little bit of distance now we've got from that, being a couple of weeks out, has your opinions changed or evolved from when we spoke about this last?
No, I think I sort of stick along the same sort of lines, When we were talking on the last podcast where we were going into the specifics of what we think Bungie can sort of add to PlayStation, definitely some of the PlayStation developers, Bungie are the kings of the community, as we sort of touched on last episode when they won all the awards for how well they treat their community with Destiny and sort of Halo. So I think the PlayStation studios can definitely get upskilled by Bungie, and that's the one way that you basically don't stop the Bungie games being cross-platform and still get your money's worth out of the acquisition. But just going back to one of Spencer's earlier points, 3.6 billion, that fails in comparison to the 68.7 billion that Microsoft spent on Activision Blizzard. But yeah, 3.6 billion, that's a crazy amount of money for Sony to be spending. And they're not spending money, they're not spending billions for them not to be creating exclusives. So from that, I don't believe anymore. They're going to be coming out with some exclusive at some point.
Wow. Okay, well, we might be able to come back round to kind of exploring that point in a little bit. I want to hand over to yourself, James. I want to see kind of how the Destiny community kind of reacted to this news and your kind of thoughts about this overall deal, and if you even feel that Bungie are a fit to be working with PlayStation Studios.
Okay. So Bungie are creating a new multiplayer FPS. It's a game called Matter. We know like fuck all about it at the moment, but that is going to be PlayStation exclusive now that we know that Bungie have laid down Sony have laid down $3.5 billion. They're not going to want that on other consoles. Whereas their existing game, Destiny 2, like I said, I've got maybe 3,000 hours in it over about 4 years. I don't even want to say how much time I've got in the first game because I look, overweight, sweaty, disgusting gamer. But like, the Bungie, Destiny 2 is going to stay cross-platform, and that's good. The latest expansion, the Witch Queen, comes out in a week and a half. And there's going to be no PlayStation exclusive stuff with that expansion. However, it's up in the air, and it's very likely that there's going to be PlayStation exclusive content for expansions after that. So there's two announced. One's called Lightfall, and one's called The Final Shape. It's weird, like space Jesus shit from Destiny. That's not even an exaggeration. And I imagine that those will have PlayStation exclusive content, including weapons. So there's going to be a split meta, which there was in the first Destiny, with there's a weapon called Hawk Moon, and it had a chance to like 1 or 2 tap an opponent with like 2 headshots, and it was a pistol, so it was very overpowered, and it was PlayStation exclusive because Sony gave a bunch of money to Destiny to launch with the PS4. So yeah, cross-platform, it's going to stay, but there's going to be... the chances are high that there's going to be exclusive content. But I think the main reason that Bungie were bought by Sony is, one, fuck Microsoft. That's a classic, They kicked a bunch of dirt in Sony's mouth, 2 weeks ago with the acquisition of Activision? If you've read Bungie's post, multiple posts, they're looking to make Bungie a media empire. So there's going to be Destiny films, comics, some weird cinematic universe bullshit. And now Sony have the license to that. And they've been making films. Uncharted comes out... I think Uncharted comes out today.
Today?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Day of recording.
So Uncharted comes out today. They made the Ratchet and Clank film 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4. It wasn't that good, but they're putting a lot of money behind the Uncharted film. They've got the Spider-Man, the twink from Spider-Man, in that, and that, it seems to be quite a big budget production. So for them to want to make a film or media series with Destiny to spend that much to get the rights to it sort of makes more sense than to gatekeep Destiny from PC and Xbox.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I suppose thinking bigger picture outside of video games, there's always more money to be made in the hardest of hardcore fans buying pretty much every single bit of merchandise. I mean, you just look at Phil. Phil's entire house now is full of Death Stranding merchandise. I don't think there's anything left apart from, has your bed been turned into, are you sharing your bed now with BB, Phil? Or is that not happened just yet? Has Laura put a foot down on that one?
So the matching bedspread and pillow set, that's coming next week. Ready for Valentine's Day. Perfect way to celebrate.
So, James, I want to come back to a point you made there about the kind of split meta. How did the community respond to that? Is it something, because it's been a precedent in the past with Destiny 1, as you quite rightly said, with the marketing deal that they had on that game at the launch of PlayStation 4, is this something the community were up in arms about, or is this something that they just kind of shrugged off because it's happened before?
Objectively, it's a bad thing to have the same game, but have, one set of instructions on like the best loadout or optimal DPS for like a raid boss on one system, and then one like set for another. So it seems a bit, gatekeepy. As another thing, you can play Destiny 2 on any system. So I mainly play it on PC because I'm a fucking loser. But if I played it on my PS5, I've got my account on there. I've got all my stuff. I'm not able to access the DLCs, I don't think, because it's like the platforms that are weird. But any weapon I've got, I can access it on the PlayStation 5. And any weapon I get on PS5, I can access on the PC. But with a split sort of, this is a PlayStation exclusive weapon, or, you can only do this mission on PlayStation 5 or PS4, that's where it starts to get a bit, like, murky.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's something then that would piss people off. I remember just little things back in the day, like for Soul Calibur, for example, on PS2 we got Hayachi, which was cool. Xbox got fucking...
Xbox had Spawn.
Spawn, man. And GameCube had Link, which is obviously the best. Well, Spawn's pretty damn cool. But yeah, we got mugged off.
I thought Hayachi was really cool.
Yeah.
I like Tekken, so... Although Spawn's fucking sick. My sister is obsessed with Spawn.
Yeah, I mean, you got one dude who's got like a flowing red cape, shoots, green balls everywhere, and has got chains, right? Like biker chains, and just looks 90s as fuck. And then you got an old man with spiky hair.
You got a green cunt with a sword as well, though.
That's true, yeah. That's true. You got some pixie looking
ass. Where do you draw the line? You got a boy in tights, some cunts with some BDSM gear and some chains, or an old dude. Like, pick your poison.
That is very true. But yeah, I can see back in those days, that was infuriating, right? Having different characters on different gear, and all it ended up was that it just got banned from competitive play. You just couldn't do that. You couldn't use this one character that other people couldn't have access to. So I suppose in that way, then these kind of like meta-defining guns, which will be exclusive to PlayStation, for example. Those then, if you were talking about, I don't know, kind of like bigger mainstream kind of like Destiny tournaments, I don't know if they exist or not, but
they don't really know.
No, okay. So,
but there are competitive game modes.
And I suppose then at that point, then is it a case that those aren't allowed because of crossplay, or are they still allowed in?
Crossplay exists, so you'll be able to, depending on like the strength of the weapon, which we won't know until it happens. And for all we know, it might not happen, but it's happened in the past, and they've spent 3.5 billion. Like, it would be silly for them to like not do that in a way, but also in another way to keep their fans happy, which Bungie do care about. Well, they're a company; they don't care about their fans; they care about selling you something, but they pretend to care about their fans. So they wouldn't want to do that. But on another hand, Sony spent a fuck ton of money on them, and they can be like, okay, we your dad, do your fucking homework. And by the homework, they mean give them a rocket launcher which shoots like 10 million fucking I don't know, like something OP.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That is fair. So you mentioned about this exclusive game that's coming to PlayStation. I think you said Matter, right?
Yeah.
Well, in Bungie's statement, didn't they exclusively say on there that they weren't going to be doing that kind of thing? That all their projects going forward are independently by them?
They did not. They said that about Destiny. Destiny 2, to be specific, So there's an arc in Destiny 2 called the Light and Dark Saga. It sounds stupid because it is. It's from when Destiny 2 came out, and it's to so we're in 2022 now, 2024. That's when that ends, and they might make a Destiny 3, and it might be PlayStation exclusive after that. So, Bungie is lack of exclusivity only applies to Destiny 2 until the third expansion comes out. So Witch Queen comes out in 2 weeks. The one after that comes out about a year after, and the one after that about a year after as well. After that, Sony can tell them to do whatever the fuck they want, and they'll have to do it because they're owned by them. So it would either be a Destiny 3, or it would be a new chapter of Destiny 2, which is only available on PlayStation 5 or something like that. But in terms of matter, that is absolutely going to be PlayStation 5 exclusive. There's no question about it.
I mean, for me, I feel like locking down any kind of content from Destiny specifically, or any game that's got a legacy of being multiplayer, is a bad idea. I think it's just a bad idea, not just for business, but optically as well. Because you've got a community which are going to be wild on playing this game for years, right? Like, the Destiny community's been around forever. And like you said, you put like 3,000 odd hours. Years. Yeah, that in gaming terms, that's like since the dawn of time, right? Like 8 years. That's forever. And if you put 3,000 odd hours in, there's going to be people on there that are going to be way more hardcore, right? And they put like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in. And if they play on Xbox, and then all of a sudden you say, right, Destiny 3, the game that you're going to be lapping up every single bit of content, you're going to be sitting there at the bowl like Oliver, please, sir, can I have some more? And they're like, no,
yeah,
bash out your hand, right? Stand on your nan and say, no, you're not getting anything else. It's only on this platform. They're just going to say, right, well, fuck off, and just move, and just literally just think, no, I'm not having this, right?
I don't know. Destiny. So Destiny 1, that had a 4-year lifespan, and as soon as that ended, I mean, you can still play it now, but like no new content gets added. None of your shit transfers to Destiny 2. So when Destiny 2 ends, or they stop updating it with new content and they release a Destiny 3, if they do that, which they haven't expressed interest in yet, but that being said, they just got bought by Sony, so that could change. They very well might just be like, okay, well, you can still play Destiny 2, but Destiny 3 is going to be PlayStation 5 exclusive, and if you don't have a PS5, fuck yourself.
Do you not think it could be a case, right? Obviously, Sony's been dipping into PC a lot, so it could be a case of Destiny 3 being added to play at PS5, PS4, and PC, and also just a case of maybe as like Sony platforms get the exclusive weapons, and for the game and DLC itself, it's timed exclusivity.
No, that could happen, and that's what happened with Destiny 1. They were timed exclusives for a year, so that's very likely to happen. So when I say exclusive weapons, it could be timed, it could be permanent. Most likely it will be timed, though.
At the end of the day, you've got to do what's best for business. You've got to keep your current cross-platform customers happy. So you've got to keep your Xbox customers happy. But at the same time, you've got to find a new way of attracting, your potential customers now on PlayStation over to that platform, because that's where you're going to make the most money. And the way to do it, in my mind, is through vanity items and sort of maximizing the potential of what Bungie are known for, and that's their community. So why not say, this is where the community thrives over on PlayStation. You could play the game to the same level over on Xbox, but on PlayStation, you have all these extra benefits, and that's community-based items, as opposed to anything that's sort of competitive based. So we're not playing Xbox against PlayStation. We're both focused on the same game, but you get a better experience on PlayStation.
Yeah, I see that happening. Cosmetics in Destiny's always been a very contentious sort of topic. Back in 2016-17 with the Eververse store, which was their sort of solution to in-game cosmetics. that had a lot of backlash when that first came out, and they've sort of refined it. But obviously, it's cosmetics. It's not necessary, but people like cosmetics. It dates back to let's say Bungie, for example. It dates back to Halo. You'd level up to get the recon armor set, and then you'd be able to show people in game that you had put in that much time and effort to get an armor set.
It's just things to sort of encourage them to the platform. And 2 weeks when we talked about the acquisition of Call of Duty onto Xbox, we were just saying it's also the empty threat that at some stage they might take it away, right? So my example was that I'm a 16-year-old kid going in and I'm a massive COD fan. What console do I buy? They're owned by Xbox, so I buy an Xbox. Regardless it's on PlayStation, I'm buying the Xbox because it's going to be there for the foreseeable future. And I think that's what Sony needs to do with the Destiny acquisition. They need to maximize the marketing spend and link it heavily to the PlayStation brand. So when I'm walking in the shop, I'm thinking Destiny, I'm thinking PlayStation, and that's the console I buy, regardless that it's on both.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Phil. I completely agree with you. I think, much like you said there, at the end of the day, if you can get the biggest net, if you can get the biggest net possible out there to get the most kind of reward, but then have your kind of, your gateway, like your giant tentpole releases locked the fuck down, then that is enough to get people kind of into the platform. And then, as you said, slowly drip feed them with stuff. And in this case, just empty threat them. Just fucking... I'd lock this shit down if I was Sony. What am I talking about? I'd just lock this down.
But also, just going back to the conversation about vanity items, PlayStation are bringing forward the themes for the PlayStation. Why wouldn't you release a whole set of Destiny themes, but not release them on Xbox? Because if I'm a Destiny fan, and my room's full of Death Stranding shit, right? I want everything Death Stranding. If Death Stranding was exclusive, well, not exclusive, but just more content was available on one platform, I would go naturally to that platform.
I want to move it away from Destiny for a moment, lads, because we've been spending quite a lot of time just on Destiny itself, whereas I think there's a lot more for the actual just deal that we can discuss, and especially get Spence. I really want to hear some more of these kind of different thoughts from my own, really, especially as in an odd turn of events for the podcast, me and Phil are actually on agreement here, which certainly never happens, and you're our outlier.
It's 2022, baby. It's the year of Phil and Davey. Sorry, Spence. You've been usurped.
He's out of here. I start off by coming to you first on one episode, Phil, and now it's all turned around now. Now you're in the good books, and Spence has been tossed aside. So a couple of things that we've been bounding around quite a bit on this podcast, actually, over this topic, and I want to kind of clarify this a little bit. It's been mentioned a couple of times now about how this is like kind of a counterpunch to the Microsoft acquisition, and obviously this was in the works way before. So this wasn't something that's been just a turnaround deal that's happened as a result of this. But like we speculated last episode, it's something that you announce it now as that kind of counterpunch, whereas it had already probably been in the works since, I think they said they were meeting up in like October 2021, I think. And it's gone on from there. So Spence, I want to ask you about the kind of counterpunch that Sony are going to be supplying here. Now, there's people that have been talking like crazy this last couple of weeks, all about how they should buy Capcom, they should buy Konami, they should buy EA, all this nonsense. What do you think? Do you think they should go down any more of these acquisitions?
Right, well, firstly, fuck you, Phil, you can get in the bin. You boys record about me once and this happens, I'm fuming. Secondly, I think even after the Blizzard Activision acquisition, Sony is still the powerhouse. Sony is still in the lead. They're not sweating. As much as it was a big acquisition for Microsoft, people aren't changing to Xbox because of it. I'd be surprised if they are, considering just get a PC. Most people have a PC and a PlayStation already. So I'd be quite surprised if people just switch platforms because of it. I don't think Sony really have to do anything. I don't think they have to counter at all. Obviously, it'd probably be in their best interest to do so. But I personally just don't think they need it. I think they're strong. And the types of acquisitions they would make to retaliate wouldn't be their strong suit. Seeing as like the Bungie acquisition happened, sure, that was planned in the past, but that's for a multiplayer title, which Sony, as much as multiplayer games exist on PlayStation, that's not what they're known for. The types of acquisitions that this kind of rivalry will cause Sony to buy don't benefit Sony as much as their smart prior acquisitions do. So I think just stand strong and just fuck it. Be like, yeah, fucking have them. What do we care?
This is the worst episode I could ever fall out with Spencer on because he's doing the edit. So I'm not even going to exist in this episode at all, am I? But by the by, I'll still try and get my point over. I think, and actually I'm quite surprised that we're still just talking about Bungie. Because 2 weeks ago, Jim Ryan's saying that Sony has many more moves to make. I was expecting a follow-up. I was expecting a 1-2 punch. A little bit of Nassim Hamed bouncing and ducking, and then the uppercut comes in when they drop the big game acquisition. The one we've all been waiting for. Valve.
Yeah, this is going around now, and they're saying about these acquisitions. You know what's going to happen. We're recording on the Friday as normal. Spencer will be going to edit it. He'll be just about finished off with the edit, and it will get announced on Tuesday. It's what happens every single fucking time. The last 2 episodes on the bounce now has happened to us. So, listener, you're obviously listening to this if you're bang on the money. You listen to it on the Wednesday, on the launch date of this episode. Congratulations on the news that came out yesterday, I guess. Because I'm sure it's probably happened. And, welcome to the family, EA. Some fucking nonsense like that. Now, obviously, last episode, and I stick by it, I don't want any more acquisitions. I don't want any more. I don't want any more for either of them parties at all. I don't want any for Xbox. I don't want any for PlayStation. Because you end up just eating up every single bit of independent talent that we got out there. It's just madness. It's just madness. They're all going to have the same kind of vision and the same kind of ideals. Whereas gaming exists and is so good because you get so many different teams with so many different drives and so many different kind of company memos given to them. If you're buying up all the best like indie talent or all the best like AAA publishers, everyone's going to be speaking off the same hymn sheet, and gaming will just get boring as a result of that. And that's how I feel about this. So we're on topic 2, and today we're going to be talking about gaming difficulty, and then we're going to be cycling into accessibility. And James, you are still here with us, and that is because in university you're currently doing a project all around accessibility with gaming. Is that right?
That's correct. It's called, well, it doesn't have a name yet. It's called the Untitled Video Game Accessibility Project because I'm very original like that. The concept came to me when my roommate was complaining that she couldn't beat Demon's Souls. So she bought Demon's Souls for the PlayStation 5, and she couldn't beat it. So obviously I'm a huge Souls fan. It's in my name. So I was sort of showing her and sort of, I guess, tutorializing her on how to do it, and she still didn't really understand it. So that sort of made me take a bit of a deeper delve into it. It's like, okay, well, some people have cognition issues, and there are a bunch of other different disabilities which can affect one's experience playing a video game. There are some games you can't play if you're, deaf, blind. There's a lot of games you can't play. There's games with execution barriers for people with motor issues as well. So that's sort of where this project sort of started, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why I thought you'd be a perfect guest to be able to have on this topic, especially because you can add some much needed context and some actually research points compared to our usual just talking bullshit. But before we come over to you and we start talking about the kind of accessibility piece, I want to first off just hand it over to Phil and Spence here, talking about difficulty in games. Sifu, as we know, we spoke about it earlier on the podcast, it is out and it is difficult. Now, there's been a lot of the same old Twitter arguments have started again in terms of game reviewers outing themselves as being objectively shit at video games, where they're saying that they can't beat it it's too hard. Why should such a good game be so hard? I can't do it. Therefore, it gets a 40 on Metacritic, right? And there's these kind of things which are spouted off again. I want to first off just kind of get your take on this and this kind of the difficulty spike that Sifu has. And then we'll kind of branch it off from there. But Spence, as you've been playing Sifu just as much as I have, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I see the link now between difficulty and accessibility, because making it easy, or having the easy option in the game, makes it more accessible to critics. So that's, makes sense. I understand. But difficulty for me, it's always just been, I will never not play a game the way the developers intended. Difficulty should realistically be in the eyes of the developer and the experience they want to give you. And that's fine. I don't understand why critics, especially, want to play on any other experience. Just, it's your job, man. I don't understand. We've ranted about this in the past, I remember, and this is my exact opinion back then. But difficulty is a good thing to have in games. It truly is, because a lot of people do struggle with games. There are a lot of issues that some people can have that would make a game harder even than it would be for someone else. And that comes from experience, or the way the game's developed, or the way the controller works. So difficulty is important. But I think people should strive to play a game on the intended difficulty. And then failing that, yeah, sure, go lower. But in terms of like the critics, where they just default to easy just so they can get through it as fast as they can and not really give a shit on how the developers intended you to play it, that hurts, man. That really hurts me deep.
What about yourself, Phil?
Well, Davey, you know me. I represent the older kind of gamer. I'm the one with the grey hair, for all our video listeners. Hello. And I haven't played a lot of Sifu. But it can't be that hard, because ultimately you've completed it, haven't you, Davey? And when people talk about hard games, there's definitely some gatekeeping. James mentioned Souls, Sifu as we're talking about currently. But I'm from the generation where games were always hard. Look at the games like I grew up on. Battletoads. Have you ever completed the bike race in Battletoads? Now that is hard. Games were hard in the day when they were crushing. And all I see in the games that we're mentioning, that we're talking about now, is that kind of level. Is where you've got to go over and over and over to complete the games, and they crush you. You've got to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, going back to the beginning for you was, of course, playing Kirby in the middle of World War II. That was all you had back then for games. There wasn't anything else back then, was there? Grab a little potato out from the cupboard, from the rations from your mum, and chuck that on the side of the road and hope for the best. And that was really hard for you. I know that was really difficult. But no, I completely agree with you. Back in the 90s, and going all through that, for me, obviously, I came into gaming later than you, because obviously I'm so much younger. The 16-bit generation was full of these games that were just really, really difficult, and the 8-bit generation before that. But that was because they were short games. And so it was a way to be able to mask the game length, was to be able to make it harder so that you'd stay with that game for longer, right? And just constantly replay and replay and replay. And I think there's a place for that. I think, much like Spencer was saying, my opinion is very much the case of whatever the developers intended you to play that on, you should honor it with that, especially if you are saying that you are a game critic and that you are supposed to be representing the view of the majority, the kind of default listeners. There's always people that will play things on the hardest difficulty, right? And do permadeath runs and no-hit runs and things like that. And then you got the people then that will play on the very easy. But your job as a critic is to play that on the bare default and just play that through and experience that. So then you can relay that experience. People can say, oh, you found that difficult? I'll turn that down for me. Rather than, I blasted through it, I understand a tiny smidgen of the combat or of the mechanics because I didn't need to use them because I was getting ammo thrown at me like crazy. Or I was just one-shotting enemies.
This goes back to the conversation we had about God of War, I think, on a previous episode, I was, up to that point, a guy that would always start a game and genuinely start off on the hardest difficulty. and then just try and suffer the game as much as possible. But Davey, you brought me around to the thinking that games should be played on medium the first time you play them through, to play the game like the developer intended. And then, of course, if you get to the Valkyries and you find them too hard, just like yourself, Davey, you have to turn them down to easy to get past them, to get that trophy and to get your platinum.
Hey, I'll freely admit that Queen Valkyrie kicked my fucking ass. I'll gladly admit that I turned that down to easy, and even then she still gave me a fucking seismic whipping, and I was grateful for that whipping, but there was a platinum in the way, so I wasn't going to grind it out any longer. Now, James, coming across to you, what are your thoughts kind of on this in terms of the difficulty kind of aspect, especially when it comes to critics and their reviews?
So, if you're being paid to review video games, I think it's probably in your best interest to be able to play them as the developer intended. So, you guys have been talking about normal being like the standard difficulty, which, it is. And if a video game critic cannot play a game at that level and accurately review it, either the game is balls to the walls hard or they're shit at their job. So it sort of comes back to that with, video game critics.
When you say they're shit at their job, is their job to play video games or is their job to review video games?
You have to play it to review it. You can't look at it. You can't watch footage of it to review it. So you have to experience the game, and to experience it is to play it. Therefore, they have to play it as their job.
Well said. Absolutely well said. Now, of course, this whole debate that centers around difficulty in video games and critics complaining always opens the can of worms of when those critics cannot beat it. They argue that the game should have built-in accessibility options so that, games can be scaled for how difficult the experience is in that given game, because obviously their own capability is trash. Now, the games that always get brought up into this are, of course, Dark Souls. Dark Souls always gets brought up from the depths to come and be the centerpiece of these arguments, because that is a game that doesn't have this built into it. It's not a scalable game other than it getting harder when you go for new game pluses and things like that. It's very much a case of everyone gets the same difficulty, the same experience, much like Sifu is. Very much the same thing. And much like most roguelites are the same thing as well, actually. They're just the same thing. Taking that into account, do you think that Souls adding in like a difficulty option into that would ruin the kind of vision of that game? That's my question for you guys.
Bro, 100%. But that's a series exclusive kind of thing, I think. Like, difficulty options isn't a bad thing, but for what FromSoft intend to deliver to you, they want that to be the only way to experience the game. And sure, there are ways to like make it easier for you with specific builds, strength builds, Davey, or like, using items or spells in Demon Souls. There are strategies to make the game easier for you, but those are in-game mechanics rather than actually just making the game easier on a whole. So it's just built into the game. It's just a way to still play the game as the developers intended, but in an easier way, whereas obviously some people challenge themselves with the game, like Soul Level 1 and such. I think adding difficulty to like a Souls series, I wouldn't like it, but at the same time, there's also no reason not to, because the Souls fan base would play it on normal, or then, if there's a hard mode, which I guess is New Game Plus, but you could start with that, they would.
As I said, I represent the older gamer. Back in my day, here we go, we had cheats, and it got around all these problems, right? You would jump onto Doom if I'm a game reviewer, and you would put IDKFA, and you put IDDQD. You would get all the weapons, and you'd be invincible. You could walk through walls, and you could see the game without really playing the game. So you've got it on ultra easy there. And that's the way game reviewers, the vast majority of them, if they didn't want to play it on hard or medium, they could push through the game, they could maximize their time allocation with the game. see it to the extent of the game, so all the way to the end boss, and see all the story. Not that there was much story in Doom; it's famous for not having a story, and then put out their review. I don't understand why these days game developers don't include cheats for game reviewers, and then remove them because you could hotfix that shit these days.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's actually a really, really good point. I think that ultimately, I don't know why the industry moved away from cheats. I really don't get it. I know it's extra work, and they're worried about extra bugs and, game crashes and things like that. But they were fun as hell. Big head mode, all the classics, just changing. I remember there was in Alien Trilogy, there was one called I Got Pink Acid Boots On, and that would then give you unlimited health for that. And when I was like 6 and I was playing that game through, terrified, absolutely terrified, I was way too young to be playing that. My dad was just like, "Oh, I love Alien, I'm going to show him Alien." And I remember I was like 6 and I was like, "Dad, I really like this game. Can I see a bit of the film?" And he's like, "Yeah." Worst idea he ever had. I remember running out, screaming when the fucking facehugger goes on the guy. I was like, "Oh!" Absolutely terrified. Anyway, but it was a way for me to see that game through to completion, much like Phil's saying. And, some 30-year-old game reviewer getting paid to be able to play these games through, that might be the way to actually do it. But, James, I'm sure you've got something that you wanted to add into this discussion, especially from what Spencer was saying earlier.
Some modern games have ways of sort of taunting the player for playing on an easier difficulty. I can think of 2 examples. Wolfenstein: The New Order had, I think its easiest difficulty was, I don't know, instead of the icon being normal, it was like dressed up like a baby. I've never played Wolfenstein. And the example I can remember is if you kept failing a mission in Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, you'd get like the chicken hat, which would make, I think it made stealth more easy or something like that. I don't know. I never beat Metal Gear Solid 5, so. Yeah,
you're exactly right on both of those points. I think on Wolfenstein it's called I Want My Daddy difficulty, and it's just got a picture of BJ Blazkowicz, and he's got a dummy in, and he's got a little baby little hat on, and yeah, that's where you can just cheese through the game.
So that's the game developers essentially pissing on the player for not being able to play on normal mode, which, it's funny as fuck, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, someone's not gonna, there are people who won't be able to play it on normal for whatever reason or any higher difficulty, and they're probably gonna feel insulted by that, which, it's funny, but at the same time, some people will probably get a bit cheesed off by it. And same with the chicken hat in Metal Gear Solid, but although the chicken hats are really funny, so it's more tongue-in-cheek rather than you're a fucking baby because you can't play a video game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair criticism. I mean, like you said, I'm coming from this, and my viewpoint throughout all of this is going to be from my own viewpoint, which obviously is a very privileged viewpoint. I've got, outside of my age, letting me down when it comes to reactions these days. I've still got use of all my digits. I've got sight. I've got all the things that a general human being has, right? And so the games played on default or whatever is fine for me generally. Whereas you're quite rightly there saying that there's people that physically cannot do some of these things. And then at that point, is it actually just insulting for them when they actually try and go into those experiences? Is that a kind of gatekeeping aspect to them actually being able to enjoy this?
Davey, quick question for you. Do you like climbing mountains? Do you like going for a hike? Or do you like going for a walk?
Well, I always answer this wrong because I always say that I'm going to go for the middle option, which then is fucking easy in the game that cannot be mentioned, which always caught me out. And no, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that title. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate a little clap. Well done, though, Phil, for trying to trip me up there. I do appreciate that. So, James, you were talking there about obviously the chicken hat and difficulty and things like that. Now, linking it back to Dark Souls that we were talking about earlier, and let's move it more into the kind of accessibility side. Do you think that games should cater now to everyone, seeing as we got such a big demographic of gamers compared to what we used to have? You know, even going back to the early 2000s, gaming has grown such a huge amount in the last 20 years that we got people from all walks of life, people with, you know, severe disabilities, people with, you know, lack of sight, lack of hearing, lack of kind of motor-based function to be able to react to certain situations. Do you think that all games should cater for all players? Or do you think it's more of a case-by-case basis?
Personally, I think everyone should be able to experience every type of game, but I think the developer's vision is quite important as well. I think the example I was talking about earlier was Fallen Order, which is a Souls-like, more like Sekiro, but it has difficulty options which change the parry timings to be more lenient, the damage you take to be less, and the damage you deal to be more in that game, which is like Souls. You know, you die, you lose everything, you have to pick it up. You have to kill a boss to progress. There are bonfires. Well, they're not bonfires, but they're like meditation points or whatever the fuck. And we've seen that it works in that. For Souls games, for me, as someone who's like played a fucking lot of Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, I like the challenge. I like that you have to be punched in the face repeatedly until you learn how to grab the arm that punches you and shove it up the rectum of the person doing it. You know, the whole thing. But it's not for everyone. So if the developers from FromSoft want more people to play their games, to make it more accessible, then they could include that. But personally, and I'm an advocate for accessibility options in games, I don't think difficulty options should be added to the Souls series just because of the legacy of FromSoft, you know, going all the way back to fucking Kingsfield and that really shitty Xbox 360 game, like the Ninja Blade. You know, they've always had a set difficulty. It's always been hard as balls, but once you conquer it, that feeling is it's like ecstasy. It's fucking amazing. And then when you do it on New Game Plus 7, you feel like, I did that. But for people with motor function issues, that's where accessibility options come in. If you're hard of hearing, there could be more distinct sound cues, which wouldn't change the gameplay experience for someone who, you know, didn't have issues like that. For motor function issues, something like an increased parry window, which would be optional, don't get me wrong, that could work. Fairly controversial. I wouldn't use it. You know, my hands work fine, but it would allow more people to be able to play the game.
Yeah, I think from what you said there, that's pretty much exactly how I feel, to be honest. And I've always been down the same kind of line of thinking, which is whatever the developer intends for you to experience, for you to feel, that's what you should go with, right? That's what you should do. But my mind has been changing a little bit more recently, seeing as how included they are into games generally now. Like, I look at The Last of Us 2, for example, and I see how much they've done there to be able to make that accessible to everyone. And none of those options impacted my experience of the game. I just played it on normal through and really enjoyed my time with it. And there's nothing to stop them saying, right, well, we're going to include all these different things into our game. And this would be the same for Dark Souls 2, in my opinion, is that you can say, right, I'm going to include all these things, but trophy-wise, you get it for beating it on normal. And that way, then, you can kind of separate the boys from the men for the people that say, oh, yeah, I completed Souls, I beat it on New Game Plus 7, but they had it actually set to, you know, very easy with parry timing as auto-complete, right? You've got these different things to be able to separate, so you can still be your little boasting big dick with your trophies to the people that aren't like that, right? But it means that at least the experience is open then for people who have disabilities or have, you know, a lack of motor function to be able to actually exist and see those games through. And that is something that I didn't actually have that opinion only probably 6 months ago. I was very much a case of fucking, well, it's not for you.
That's exactly how I was, before I started doing the project. You know, I was like, well, if you can't beat fucking Ayud Iskander in Dark Souls 3, then you shouldn't fucking play it. But I think everyone should experience it. It's a fucking, like, Souls games are fucking wonderful.
I'll go back. Davey, you kind of stole one of my points because I brought it up. Last of Us 2 has a whopping 60 accessibility options. That game is accessible as fuck, and I could list them all because I have it up right now, but I won't because that's a long list. And then saying to Dark Souls how that should be like accessible for everyone, gamers blow me away because there are some gamers out there that do crazy things. There's a Twitch streamer called Handy Capable One, and he's beaten Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Sekiro, and Jump King all with his chin because he doesn't have proper use of his arms. There's also, at EVO 2013, there was a blind player who went and played Mortal Kombat 9. Granted, he didn't do very well, but he was able to play the game and he gave it his best shot. And people applaud him for it. That's amazing that people are able to do that. Even games that don't have these amazing accessibility options, gamers are finding a way to make it work for them. So the devs should be able to as well.
Spencer, you say 60 accessibility options with The Last of Us? I'm going to trump you. When I'm talking about accessibility, the first game that comes to mind is World of Warcraft. They have accessibility up the wazoo. Settings for color deficiencies, font sizing, the HUD scaling. It goes on and on and on what you can do in World of Warcraft. And then we open it up to the modding community because this game's on PC. It's endless the amount of optionality in that game. And I don't know if you've ever played WoW, but no one plays it on the standard settings. Everyone's importing mods, extra plugins to the game to enrich their experience and make it easier for them. As simple as just moving a button. That's available. You can do anything in World of Warcraft. But I do agree, on console, all that stuff needs to be ramped up in the same vein as The Last of Us because they are standout when it comes to console accessibility.
I'll top you once again, my friend. You mentioned World of Warcraft. There's a game on Steam that I have and have played called A Blind Legend, and the game is developed with visually impaired players in mind. And the game basically is entirely audio-based. I think you hit maybe left and right on your keyboard, and that is it. You just make decisions, and you try to progress through the story, but everything is like told to you in your ears. There is nothing happening on screen at all. So that game is really well made. It's a clever idea, but it kind of sucks that that's the kind of lengths they have to go to involve visually impaired players. There should be a way to get them involved into the mainstream media that is gaming.
Well, that's why I'm pretty sure The Last of Us, you can actually check this up for us, actually, Spence, if you got the list up there, but I'm pretty sure The Last of Us does have a setting in there for people that have difficulties in seeing.
I can list you. They have a whole section for vision accessibility, and that is text-to-speech, high contrast display, changing the HUD scale, lock-on aim, traversal and combat audio cues, navigation and traversal assistance, a ledge guard, enhanced listen mode, invisible whilst you're prone, being unlimited. There's skip puzzle options to get past obviously puzzles. You can't see them, you'd probably struggle. And there's various adjustments in the combat accessibility menu, so you can change how combat works if you're struggling with it because you're visually impaired.
And this is the thing that kind of changed my mind, as I said, because I went in very much with the gung-ho attitude of get good. If you can't do it, sorry, there's other games for you. You can go play a Telltale game. You can go play something else with autocomplete and Bob's your uncle. Stay out of my game. Stay out of my vision. But really, my vision isn't being impacted by people being able to experience this content. It makes absolutely no difference to me. So I've done a 180 on this entire thing over the last few months.
I have one counter argument to that point. We brought up earlier how Fallen Order has a way of making parry timing easier. If they were to add that to Dark Souls or the Souls series, PvP exists in those games. What's to stop normal players with good motor functionality, to just utilize that feature and just win at PvP, being a worse player?
For PvP exclusive content, just set it to the default. Like that's the only way they'd be able to balance something like that. But the thing is, that's not something that's going to happen. We know that From Software are not going to add those sorts of options. We know that they're making some of the harder bosses in the upcoming Elden Ring, which very excited for. I know you are as well. I know you are, Span. I see it on Twitter all the fucking time. I ain't complaining. So they're making some of the hardest bosses optional, which they have been known to do throughout the Soul series. Nameless King was optional. Slave Knight Gale, DLC optional. But yeah, so for the base game of Elden Ring, the hardest bosses will be optional, and a lot of the story-only bosses are apparently going to be a fair amount easier. From what I read on the, I think it was a PlayStation blog actually. I'm not sure if you guys.
Yeah, I did, and I think that's a welcome change. I really do. I really do like being able to go off the beaten path and to challenge yourself and do these things. And that's why in, for example, God of War, which Phil referenced earlier, be able to go off and do the side content, which is the Valkyrie fights, and then fight that Queen Valkyrie, which is the hardest boss in the game, which isn't anything to do, really, with the main story that you experience. That's fantastic, because it means that people that want that challenge can seek that out. But generally, people that are there for the plot and to actually just experience the game, they can then tailor that to how they see fit and enjoy that experience at kind of a level which kind of has a gradual steep, rather than something like, say, for the Nameless King on Dark Souls 3, he kicked my fucking ass for ages until I adapted to him. A massive difficulty spike compared to the rest of the game. And I really love that kind of style of game development, where you can make these things ultimately seek out your own pain. I do really enjoy that. Now, bringing this back to Sifu, which we were discussing earlier, do you think then that the argument that people are making that this game should have accessibility options, do you think that would lessen the impact of Sifu? Spence, in particular.
I think it would 100% lessen the impact, because the whole point of Sifu is the type of game that you mentioned earlier, James, where it's it beats you down until you learn it. It's literally a roguelike, so you just die and die and die until eventually you're just not losing as many years, and then suddenly you've lost no years, and then you're just beating the game, being the best you've ever been at the game. They could do maybe some things. Obviously, they could do accessibility options in terms of audio cues on parry timing, or making it more visual when an opponent's going to strike. But other than that, if they change the way the combat itself actually works, Sifu wouldn't be the same game. The difficulty in Sifu is what makes it so great, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that, fully. When developers introduce accessibility options, it shouldn't be interfering with the core game that they've built, but it should be adding workarounds or, reducing or maybe adding little features that make things, possible for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to play it. So Sifu has one difficulty option, which is fine. That's the way the developers intended it, and their vision shouldn't be changed. But if there were accessibility options that made it easier, for example, Davey said about sounds of parry timings or visual indicators, which are a great one and they're not that difficult to implement, as an option, that should be, something that a player could turn on to make the game, more playable for them, especially if they were audibly or visually impaired.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to pick up on something Davey said. He said that having accessibility within a game doesn't impact him. So Davey, what about release timing? Sony is famous for game delays. The whole industry is famous for game delays. All the time we're getting pushback. It's not ready. It's not ready. Are you telling me that if I'm a game developer, my priority is accessibility on my initial release? You can't have everything when a game first comes out. Look at what Returnal did. It made the game easier by phasing in a save system later on after its initial release. That's the way I think we should approach gaming going forward. We should iterate and improve on things to make the game accessible to more and more people as time goes on. But on your initial release, I think if you're giving me that wish list of accessibility, you're going to be waiting. Like, games are going to be years and years and years late.
I think it all depends on how much you want to sell your game. I think if you want to go just for the general mass market, that's absolutely fine. If you want to be able to reach that upper echelon and to capture everyone and to get literally good news in terms of optical good news, you know, where Kotaku and all the bullshit websites are writing little think pieces about how they were able to beat the game because they were able to make it easier. But then also at the same time say this is great for people that have disabilities. You could get the great optics from that, and you get to open it up to the entire market rather than it being keyed down to a single market. There is no disadvantage to adding this to your game on release. And in Returnal's example, just to bring it back to you, when you said about Returnal making this easier, it didn't. It just made it so that when you load that save up, it deletes your save data. So it's still just as hard, but it means that you can just leave it where you wanted to leave it. So you can go to bed. Instead of being like, well, it's 4 a.m. I got to be up with the kids in 2 hours, but I'm just at the end of the 4th boss. I might as well see it through, boys. And just keep going. And next thing you know, your kids have missed school. They're not having their Cheerios in the morning because you're still fighting Frike. And that's just the way it was back then. And my son, he understood. He can miss a couple of meals, chuck a little food bowl down for him. I'm beating Frike. Just go to school. Walk yourself. You're 3 years old now. Grow up. And it's just the way it was. But now you got those options to be able to give players a bit of flexibility that comes with it, but not limit the potential for save scumming or any of the other things that come with that to lower that difficulty down. James, you wanted to jump in on this.
I did. I was going to mention Metroid Dread. They I think yesterday they patched in a easier mode, and the game's been out for what, 3 months at this point now. I think it came out in October. I might be wrong. But they introduced an easy mode and it was called Dread mode. I think it was sort of like I think one hit and you're dead. So going back to patching in accessibility options when, after a game comes out, I think a lot of the sales of a game are made in that sort of early window. I may be wrong.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Most game sales are made right at the start of that game's launch, and then it drops off a cliff.
So if you're going to release a game without accessibility options out of the front and then be like, oh yeah, no, we'll patch it in like 3 months later, can't deal with it, then the people who, I guess, need those options for whatever reason aren't going to buy it, or they might buy it, but interest might be lost. So sales could be affected if they patched in shit like later down the line. I guess that's sort of how I see it.
This whole kind of argument of should a game launch with accessibility or should it be patched in later on to kind of rush the development to get it out on time, it's basically saying that it's timed exclusivity if you're disabled. And that is a disgusting thing to think about. I think even if a game has to be delayed to add those accessibility options, sure, that sucks. And if you don't need accessibility options, you think, oh, what's the point? I wouldn't use them anyway. But it's a good thing. People need that. And then if it will increase the sales because people are still hyped for that game. As long as they don't do a Cyberpunk, it's fine. The game will come out. The same people that would have bought it will buy it. And then they're able to sell it to just a larger market. If you're launching a game without accessibility options, you're limiting yourself from that extra market. And also, that just sucks, man. That's just kind of a horrible thing to do. Obviously, patching in accessibility options isn't a bad thing. If there's like a new workaround or a new way to make the game more accessible, that's fine, and patch it in. But if you're able to have that at launch, I think that will always be the better choice. Because timed exclusivity sucks. And if it's timed exclusivity in that sense, that is horrible.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I think to summarize this topic, really, the main thing we need to say is that we do fully respect that developers have their own visions and how they come up to it. But we're all in agreement here that developers really should consider how people can play their game and if they can make that scalable so that people can actually experience that in a way that they couldn't do before.
Right, guys, we're on to the next topic. And I want to bring up the recent showcase and the recent state of play that we had. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had Ghostwire Tokyo, the official showcase, and we've had Gran Turismo state of play. They were both very interesting, got a lot of hype around them. I watched them both, and the viewership was up the wazoo. I didn't watch it live. I caught up later on YouTube, but I could see people popping off in chat about very different things because they were quite different. Did you guys both watch them? And what are your sort of top level sort of views? So let's start with Ghostwire Tokyo. Spence, I'm coming to you first.
Yeah, I watched them both. I watched them both live. Ghostwire Tokyo, I kind of didn't care about that game at all, just flew under my radar, but it was a state of play, so I kind of tried to watch all of them, even if it's about a game I'm not particularly interested in. But Ghostwire Tokyo, graphically speaking, didn't impress me at all. Didn't look great in the slightest, really. Probably looked like one of the worst games they've shown off, other than maybe Bugsnax. But Davey's making that face, bro. Bugsnax does not look good.
Excuse me. We've already specified on this podcast we are not having any shit talk about Bugsnax. It's a holy game, and we are eagerly awaiting for Isle of Big Snacks. So shut your fucking mouth about Bugsnax right now.
Moving on, Spence. How did you feel about Ghostwire Tokyo? The graphics weren't up to par, and I can agree with you on that one.
Yeah, the graphics definitely weren't up to snuff, but I guess that's fine because they're trying to deliver an open world game. And I suppose if everything's loaded in real time, the entire world, I suppose they obviously have to downscale the game a little bit. That kind of happens with a lot, like Elden Ring. People are saying looks worse than Demon Souls because it's open world, but also people forget that that's Bluepoint versus FromSoft. They're not by the same people technically. Because Ghostwire Tokyo, in terms of gameplay, it looked really fun. It did look really fun. It looked a bit confusing, but it looked cool. It's definitely going to be a game that Davey buys and I game share off of Davey. 100%. I don't think I'm going to be buying that game at launch unless it like blows me away with another showcase or something down the line. I say down the line, they don't have much time. But unless they show something that surprises me, yeah. The game looks good. Not graphically, but gameplay wise, it does look fun. I have no idea about the story. They showed a bit of it, but not a lot. So I'm hoping that the story is kind of what carries that game along with the gameplay. Because that is what would make it a great game.
Yeah, I can see your point. And Davey, I really want to come over to you because I feel like this is up your street, this type of game. How do you feel? Can you comment on maybe the Naruto-esque kind of Jisoo kind of combat that's included in this game? It seemed quite random to me personally. How are you feeling about it all?
Well, I gotta say, when I went into this and seeing this this showcase, I was not even remotely hyped about Ghostwire Tokyo. Like, literally not even remotely on my radar to pick up when it comes out in March. Literally not at all. And that showcase blew me away. I was so impressed by it, like really legitimately impressed by it. And Shinji Mikami, he was split off to do Evil Within 2 over in Tango and Tango Gameworks, and they've now since, of course, been acquired by Xbox, so they're part of the Xbox family these days. So it's the last kind of game we're going to get from them, I imagine, on PlayStation ecosystem. And I was absolutely super impressed by this. The entire way through the trailer, I couldn't stop going, sure, and going, yeah, like all these different noise sounds for these different hand motions that I cannot wait to do when I play this game, because this game looks so cool to actually play. And as you said, do these little Naruto moves, which just seems super hyped to me. I really thought going into this was going to be like a horror game, but it's not. It's an action adventure. And that just really blew my mind because it just looks fun to play. And ultimately, you want a game that plays well. And this looks to me like it's going to achieve that.
I would definitely echo both of your points, really. On the graphics side, I wasn't impressed. You know, when we're talking about new PlayStation games, I'm thinking Returnal. I'm thinking Ratchet and Clank. I want things to be on that level now. And when we're talking about the combat, it was interesting because it's different. And I like different. Hell, I'm the Death Stranding guy. I love different. I'd be a massive hypocrite if I started criticizing people for going outside of the box. But guys, what did you think of the presentation itself? Because it was very different to what we'll talk about later with the Gran Turismo state of play. We basically had the host interviewing different people from around the company with different kind of highlights from the game, depending on what they were talking about. Did you enjoy that kind of deep dive into the development process and individual aspects of the game?
I definitely did enjoy the way it was presented. I thought it was really cool the way they kind of just had those interviews with the staff. It was kind of a cool way to kind of show how much they care about the game, how much work they've put into the game, what their favorite things to work on were, what they're looking forward to people experiencing. It was definitely a cool take of it. And especially since, like, they had banter in there as well. Not all the answers were, like, genuine answers. Some of them were just like, yeah, this. And he's just like, oh, why? I didn't think you'd... Okay. And they kind of, like, the way they did the interviews actually rounded the game really well in terms of presentation, because they ended up going into the graphics, the gameplay, the story, the audio design. One of the guys that they interviewed was the lead composer or whatever it was. They didn't go too deep into anything specific, but they scratched the surface of mostly everything. And I think that's a really good way to show the game, because a lot of games nowadays especially are making the mistake of showing you too much. And I know we had that concern when they did the showcase for the game we can't mention, Village. Buttons back on now, boys. And it's clear that they're not doing a similar thing here. They're trying to show you the basics of everything, but not a lot of anything specific. And I really like that that's how they structured the presentation.
I completely agree. You know, it was really nice when they were going through the references for the game. And I think one of the developers listed off a bunch of different books that he was really interested in or reading at the time. And the host had never heard of any of them. And it kind of turned into a bit of banter back and forth between the two, which was really like, it was a humanizing kind of aspect to the show, which wasn't, on the flip side, like Gran Turismo, very Sony, in my opinion. Davey, do you have any closing thoughts on Ghostwire Tokyo?
I think for me, you can tell when it's been a successful showcase when it turns you from literally not being even remotely on your radar to being a must-play and being a game that I'm going to pre-order and play at the moment it comes out, which I certainly have to say for this game. This game really turned me around on it. And anything that can do that and can really sway your opinion into wanting to make that day one purchase, that's a success. That's what the showcase is for. And so for me, I rate this as being a really, really well done showcase for this title.
Okay, guys, I want to bring you on to the Gran Turismo state of play. So we're going to be getting this on March the 4th for PS4, PS5. There's going to be over 400 cars, 34 locations, 90 layouts, more tracks and cars and upgrades coming soon. We've got the GT Cafe with some challenges, the museum with all the history, the real-world fantasy tracks, mini-games and licenses, two-player split screen. It goes on and on and on. This state of play was packed, jam-packed, up the wazoo with facts. Now, I have a sense that you didn't enjoy this one as much as Ghostwire Tokyo, but let's go over to you yourself, Davey. How did you feel about this presentation?
So I feel kind of split. Speaking on myself personally, I'm not a racing fan. So GT has a huge struggle in front of it because I'm really not going to buy this game unless there's something that really stands out to me. Now, watching it on the 1080 stream when it was happening in real time, because I watched it live, it looked trash. It looked really, really grim. And I remember walking away from this saying, well, if you're a car fanatic, there's more than enough for you here than you can ever want. Especially when it started going into the history. It started talking about, the start of Porsche, the start of Ford, and running through, if you go into this gallery, you can see when they first came up with the idea for a metal car window. Or all this bollocks, right? They're just talking shit about cars that I really don't give a fuck about. But people that love cars would be so into that. And that's their target market. I think the amount of content they've got into this game is really impressive. Especially the amount of cars, the amount of detail they've added into it. The way the weather affects the tracks in real time. Really, really impressive. It just doesn't speak to me because I'm not into cars in that same way. And for me, having that same level of, if you adjust your brakes to take this corner, you then have to make sure you change your tires after so many laps, because otherwise it's going to affect your drift, or it's going to affect whatever the fuck tires do. I don't have a clue. God knows. I just make sure they're above legal limit, and that's fine for me. That's enough for me to check, right? But people that love that kind of minutia that comes with the sim-style racer, they'll love this. And so I could appreciate what they've done here to appeal to their audience, but at the same time, it didn't wow me.
I'm very much the same as you. I've never really been a big racing fan, especially on console. I used to play some Need for Speed stuff, but that's very different to Gran Turismo. But I came away from that presentation mega impressed. Mega impressed on the visuals, which apparently didn't translate when you watched it live. And the level of detail. Oh my God. If I was more into cars, this would speak to me. But unfortunately, I'm not. I'm the same as you, Davey. I'm really not into car games. I'm not into cars. So it's got an upward struggle impressing me. It impressed me to a level, but not to a level where I'm going to be buying this game. Spencer, how about you?
I more or less kind of just have to echo your boys' thoughts on this presentation, but I really do want to emphasize the fact that during the live showcase, because me and Davey watched it together at the same time, 1080p didn't do that game justice on that showcase. It really made me think maybe I need to stop watching these showcases live and watch the video afterwards when it's uploaded in 4K, at least until we start getting 4K streams, because those cars did not look good. They all looked like they were made of like clay or something stupid. And then afterwards, after the Ghost Ride Tokyo showcase, I went back and watched the VOD for Gran Turismo. And after watching it in 4K, I thought, actually, that looks stunning. It really changed and warped my opinion on that showcase. And that's not even a fault of Gran Turismo, that's a fault of just streaming on a whole right now. Because I don't think they're capable of streaming it in 4K at the moment. Maybe they are, and they just don't. But these new games, we're in a 4K gaming kind of ecosystem. We're all trying to play in 4K, and yet they're showing us these games at 1080p. It doesn't do them justice. So I kind of had bad opinions on Gran Turismo at first. In terms of what they actually showed in-game, it was awesome. The cars, or like how in-depth it was, fantastic. All that history in the game, amazing. The sky system is actually awesome. The fact that the sky changes dynamically. When it rains, it affects the track and actually changes how you have to drive. And it takes time for that course to dry. That is so cool. That's such a cool little thing. The ray tracing, stunning. Even though the reflections are clearly lower res, it still looks amazing. All of that is awesome. But I think they just need to fix how they do these showcases. Because that 1080p really didn't make me want to even consider this game. And to be fair, even though this game does look amazing, I'm still not going to consider it. Because like you boys, racing games don't speak to me too much. They could have shown me a way to make it suck my nuts. And I don't think I'd buy this game.
I think, to be fair, if it had a self-sucking motion on it, if there was a way that I could just jack myself into the PlayStation 5 and it would give me that top-notch nut experience, maybe they'd have my pre-order. But apart from that, I'm right there with you. There's nothing there for me, personally.
You'll have to wait for the PSVR 2 extensions that apparently are rumoured for that functionality, Davey. But when it comes to Gran Turismo, it's definitely about the visuals. You know, that was a big selling point. And yeah, you are right. The 1080p stream has heavily impacted how that's come across, unfortunately. But guys, I've got a question for you. And I think I know the answer already. Out of the two, which kind of style do you prefer? So you've got Ghostwire Tokyo, which is a bit more relaxed. We're interviewing devs. There's a bit of banter, but we get a deep dive into the game. On the flip side, you've got Gran Turismo, which is heavy PlayStation style. It's heavy on the facts. Where are you going if you could pick a style for the next state of play? Spencer, I'm going to come to you first.
If I could choose the way they would do the next state of play, whichever game it's about, it could literally be about anything. I would 100% prefer them to take the style of Ghostwire Tokyo. Just because Gran Turismo, yeah, it was amazing. It was a great showcase. They showed a lot. They showed too much. I don't need to play that game. I know everything that game has to offer. Granted, it's a simulation game, so it is a different genre. So it's just kind of nice to know everything that game entails. Whereas obviously Ghostwire Tokyo is a story-based game, so it is different. They don't want to show you any of that. But I would like to just know the surface of a game rather than know everything about it. A lot of people didn't buy Last of Us 2 because they knew everything that happened in it. Whereas if they just knew the surface of it, maybe they would have, and they'd have different opinions on it.
Yeah, fair point. And Davey, what are you saying? For the next game that comes out, do you want them to go down the Ghostwire Tokyo route, or are you much more in line with kind of the PlayStation norm, I would say, with Gran Turismo?
I gotta say for example, we're talking about God of War Ragnarok, and I got a choice between either doing like kind of an informal interview style with a short gameplay experience, which they did with Ghostwire, or a mega in-depth look at all the systems and how it all works together and the improvements they've made over previous entries. I'm going for the GT approach on this. I definitely am. Now, I know that in my heart of hearts, I'd rather not see it because I'm already sold on the game. But I would love that level of attention to detail they've put into that showcase to sell me as an existing fan on that franchise. Now, I think the difference is that state of play, that kind of style, doesn't entice new people in. It's the people that are already kind of interested or on the fence with that it kind of already gets, because it's kind of catering to that audience. And so for me, if I was a fan of a game that they were showing off, I want that detail. Even though I don't want to see it, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from seeing it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think probably I've agreed with you most of this podcast. I'm going to agree with you again. I think for the next day of play, I much prefer the Gran Turismo kind of heavy on the facts and seeing quite a lot of the game sort of, shown. And I kind of felt like with Ghostwire Tokyo, especially when they were going off and having those banter moments, it was really detracting from the content that they're trying to sell. I would see Ghostwire Tokyo's kind of approach as being more like a supplemental, something I would get served afterwards, after the big presentation. I would see Gran Turismo's presentation as the big bang. Ghostwire Tokyo is something I'm going to give you later on Twitter.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, you think about how they do, like, let's take Nintendo, for example. They do the Nintendo kind of showcase where they do their big direct around E3, and then they have their Nintendo Treehouse, they call it, where they do, like, they have developers on and they talk about stuff and they have a little bit of banter with a show host, and they kind of show the game that way. It kind of felt a little bit more like that. It wasn't quite to that extreme, because they did have a big gameplay section. It was very scripted for the parts that it was like that. And then they just had in these moments with the developers. I did enjoy that style. I really did. And as I said, it has been a success because it sold me on the game itself. But between the two styles, between having kind of all the facts and knowing then whether or not it's for you or not, I've got to go with the one that gives you the most information. And GT does that.
Well, thanks, lads. We've obviously got some sort of mixed opinions here. I know I've been agreeing with Davey all night, and it's not just because it's his birthday. I honestly, some of the stuff he's come up with tonight, spot on. I do agree with you, mate. But I'd love to know your views, viewers and listeners. So feel free to write into the email, pswetrust@gmail.com.
You can reach out to us on Twitter. So our Twitter handles will all be in the description below.
And you can reach out to us on Reddit, which will also be in the description below.
And of course, the best way to support the podcast is to put a review, which you can put it on Spotify, or if you're on any other platforms, especially Apple or Google, it all helps us to find a larger audience. Now, for you YouTube listeners, if you like the video, then please put a like on it and subscribe for more content in the future. Of course, we're a fortnightly podcast, so we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. This has been episode 36 of In PS We Trust, a PlayStation podcast. I've been Davey.
I've been Phil.
And I've been Spencer.
Take care, guys.
Peace.
In PS We Trust is hosted by Davey, Phil, and Spencer. You can write into the show via our email, pswetrust@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @InPSWeTrust. To find each of us online, follow our Twitters, @SSJDavey, @PhilipHoy, @SpenPie_. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.